Hey guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peter Watches TV, where I watch all the TV shows. I watch all the true crime shows. I watch all the trending shows on Netflix and Apple, and I watch all the reality shows, the Sister Wives, everything, and then I react to it over here, and we have a little conversation. So if you guys like to watch TV shows, and you want to have some place to talk about it, or watch reactions to it, then subscribe to my channel, and let's hang out and talk about TV shows. I love TV shows. And today I'm going to talk about the new trending series on Netflix, which is called Monsters, and it is about the Menendez brothers. So before I get into this, I kind of want to explain the way that I'm going to do this video. When I started watching the show, I started taking some notes, which I usually do when I watch a show that I'm going to react to over here. And then I thought, no, I just want to kind of step back and watch this show and see what I think about it. And my opinion kind of changed over time, in all honesty. I watched like the first episode, and then I watched the second episode, and then going further into the show, what I thought the show was going to be about, and the way that I thought it was going to be depicted was completely different than how I felt when I finished watching the show. And I'm seeing this like public outcry about this show, and a lot of people are saying things, and Erik Menendez has come out and made a statement, which I'm going to read to you in just a second. I'm actually going to read this part first before I get into what I really thought about the show, because I kind of want to react to that part as I'm going through talking about this show. But when I started watching it, I was talking to people. I even talked about it on my vlog channel about what I thought. And what I thought originally and what I thought when it was done were completely two different things. And it's interesting because I'm seeing a lot of people like turning away from the show and not watching the show because of how they believe that it's depicted. So the Monsters about Erik and so Ryan Murphy did the show Monsters Dahmer, about Jeffrey Dahmer, and then he came back and he did this show about Lyle and Erik Menendez, the two brothers that killed their parents, Kitty and Jose Menendez, I believe in 1990. Because when I was watching the show, I was like, I have not followed this case that much. It's interesting because like with true crime, I love true crime. I have a true crime book club that I run with my good friend Mel. We pick a book and a true crime documentary every month. So if you want to be part of that book club, the link is listed below. It's on Facebook. All you have to do is come over there and join it. But I have like read so many books about true crime. I've watched, almost every true crime documentary that's out there. But I kind of stay away from the big stories, if you want to know the truth. Like I didn't know much about the Scott Peterson, Lacey Peterson case until I just covered it recently and watched those documentaries. Natalie Holloway, I didn't know a lot about until I just recently watched those two documentaries. And so a lot of the big cases, I kind of stay away from. I'm really more interested in like the smaller cases, the unknown cases of missing people and stuff like that. So the Menendez brothers was not a case that I followed that closely at all. So in 1990, I graduated from high school in 1990. And it was interesting because at one part in the show, Erik Menendez, I don't know if this actually happened or was fictionalized, because anybody going into this show knew that it's a Ryan Murphy show. Ryan Murphy does, American Horror Story and all this kind of stuff. So you knew that it was going to be a fictionalized version of what happened with the Menendez brothers. And so going into that, that's going to be that, right? I will be honest with you. I am not somebody that loves dramatizations of true crime stories unless they're done extremely well. The dramatization of The Staircase, I loved. I thought it was fantastically done with Toni Collette. But other than that, there aren't a lot of dramatizations of true crime stories that I really, really like, because I think that it leaves open a creative ideology of what really happened when you don't know what happened. Conversations occurred that are just being made up for the show and things like that. I don't love that. That's why I like to watch true crime, because I like to watch evidentiary fact, right? So, but when you're going into this show, you know that it's going to be a dramatization. It's a fictionalized version of what happened. It's interesting though, that when they're showing, I've been sober for 29 and a half years. My sobriety birthday is December 17th of 1994. I can remember before I got sober, my friends and I sitting around in my apartment and watching on TV the O.J. Simpson, like the van going down the highway and stuff like that, or the Bronco. And it's interesting because in the show, they show O.J. Simpson coming into LA County Jail and allegedly putting him into a cell right next to Erik Menendez, and Erik Menendez talking to him about his attorney and things like that. And so that was interesting because the timing for me, I was like, okay, so the Menendez brothers thing happened, I think, like in 1990 or something, which was when I graduated from high school. I think the trial, or it happened a couple years after that, whatever. So that whole thing happened, like at the biggest part of my using, which is probably why I don't know about this case a lot. But I've heard through the years about the Menendez brothers. I knew they killed their parents. I didn't really know much about that. In all honesty, as somebody that hasn't kept up with this story, what I always thought was they killed their parents for money. I had really never heard of the SA allegations or that kind of stuff. I didn't really know much about that. I think maybe, I don't know, I read an article or something where it was mentioned, but I don't really remember a lot of this case whatsoever. I just knew if you said to me, who are the Menendez brothers, I wouldn't even have been able to tell you their first names. I would have said they killed their parents and they were like rich kids. And I did, interestingly enough though, I did know that the Billionaire Boys Club, that movie, had something to do with it. I don't know why. Like, I feel like I watched an interview or something about that years ago. So it's a 9-part documentary, okay, or 9-part dramatization of the, it's not a documentary, it's a 9-part dramatization, fictionalized story of Lyle and Erik Menendez killing their parents, Kitty and Jose Menendez, and then the court trial afterwards, the interviews that happened with the attorneys and things like that. When I started watching the show, I've just seen the poster of the show, I was like, you know, I've watched almost everything that Ryan Murphy has ever done. Everything that he's ever put out, I've watched. And I feel like year after year, he gets a little bit more, like, it gets a little bit more and more homoerotic. And so when I saw the poster for this, I was like, I have never, I don't know that I've ever heard, and like I said, I didn't keep up with this case that much, but I don't know that I've ever heard anything about some kind of, like, romantic relationship between these brothers. So when I saw the poster, I was kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? What's going on to this? And when I started watching it, when you watch the first two episodes are like, Lyle Menendez is like in the pool and like he's in the Speedo. There's like a lot of butt shots. I mean, it's a very, like the first two episodes are very homoerotic and there's a lot of touching between the brothers and stuff like that. And the touching between the brothers at the beginning of it and the end of it is completely different than how I thought it would be. I thought they were going to go in the direction where they like full on like showed the brothers having like this incestuous relationship, which is not what they show whatsoever. And so I was when I started reading about this outcry, I was kind of surprised. I was like, I just watched the show. Like, I binge watched it in 2 days. My husband binge watched it in like 24 hours. And he had a very similar take that I did. It was interesting because, well, we'll get into this in just a second. So anyway, I want to read this article really quick from Out Magazine, and it came out 4 days ago, and it says, the real-life Erik Menendez just responded to Ryan Murphy's Monster series, and I'm just gonna read several parts of it. Viewers are not happy with Ryan Murphy's latest show, Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story. The new series from Murphy tells the story of the real-life Menendez brothers, Erik and Lyle, who were convicted of murdering their parents in 1980, I guess it happened in 1989. The show portrays their lives as exciting, sexy, campy, titillating, and more than a little incestuous. I'm surprised that they're saying that, because I did not get that from the show. But the truth was much darker, as the brothers were reportedly SA'd by their father for years with their mother's knowledge, which is what they claim as the reasoning behind why they killed their parents. And now, viewers are growing tired of Murphy's obsession with making true crime more salacious than real life. And then people go in here, and there's like some tweets from people. The Menendez brothers were victims of SA who finally retaliated against their abusers. This disgusting piece of trash has turned their story into an incestuous fanfic. Taking a story about two brothers who suffered from SA from their dad and turning it into an incestuous fantasy is horrid. Somebody said, I'm actually speechless. Seeing them create this fan fiction involving incest between real-life brothers is crazy to me, especially when they have been victims of abuse, and incest themselves is absolutely vile. But it's not only viewers who are mad. One of the subjects of the show, Erik Menendez, has seemingly responded from prison. According to a statement, Menendez called the show vile and appalling character portrayals of Lyle and me and a disheartening slander. And apparently this is true. Erik Menendez and Lyle Menendez are both married today to women that they met through, like, letters in jail. So apparently this is through his wife. A TikTok account appearing to be from Tammy Menendez, who married Erik Menendez while he was in prison, has now released a statement in Erik's words. I believe we had moved beyond the lies and ruinous character portrayals of Lyle, creating a caricature of Lyle rooted in horrible and blatant lies rampant in the show, he said. I can only believe they were done so on purpose. It is with a heavy heart that I say, I believe Ryan Murphy cannot be this naive and inaccurate about the facts of our lives, so as to do this without bad intent. It is sad for me to know that Netflix's dishonest portrayal of the tragedies surround our crime have taken the painful truths around several steps backward, back through time to an era when the prosecution built a narrative on a belief system that males were not sexually abused and that males experience our trauma differently than women. Now, how demoralizing to know that one man with power can undermine decades of progress in shedding light on childhood trauma. The statement continues, violence is never an answer, never a solution, and is always tragic. As such, I hope it is never forgotten that violence against a child creates 100 horrendous and silent crime scenes darkly shadowed behind glitter and glamour and rarely exposed until tragedy penetrates everyone involved. So I read this thing and I asked my husband, I said, he had just finished it when I read the article, and I said, what did you think about the show? And he said, because he started, I was 4 episodes or 5 episodes in when he started watching it, and he goes, it was okay. I have to be honest with you, both this and the Jeffrey Dahmer show, I thought were okay. I didn't think they were anything I wouldn't recommend them to anybody. They weren't, I didn't think they were that fantastic. From a storytelling point of view, from the acting, people were like, the acting, this was great. I think there were some scenes where the acting was really, really well done. But I'm also a huge movie watcher. I've seen a lot of really great acting in independent films that never get any kind of notice whatsoever. I don't know. Both this and Dahmer, I don't know. I think it's weird that he's kind of going down this road a little bit. But I said to my husband, I said, what did you think? And he goes, I 100% feel like they were abused. And he goes, and I feel like that was the purpose of showing the story. So this is what's interesting to me, okay, about this public outcry that's going on. And I'm not saying that people don't have a right to have this public outcry. But I even said this in my vlog when I was watching it, I said, I almost kind of felt like that was the purpose of the show. Because when you go in and you watch the show, so many people had said to me before I got to it, the 5th episode, I was getting DM'd and people were like, wait till you get to the 5th episode. And I was like, what happens in the 5th episode? In the 5th episode, it's interesting, Erik's take is on Lyle and painting this picture of Lyle, because I actually think that Erik comes across worse in the show than Lyle does. So it's interesting that he says that in his statement. But in the show, the 5th episode is literally the entire episode is all with Erik Menendez being interviewed by his attorney. You don't even see the front of her face. It's just the back of her head interviewing him the entire time, and it's all about the sexual trauma. The entire episode. It is such a hard episode to watch. And in that episode alone, I think the actor that played him, I can't remember what his name is, I looked all these people up, but I think that he did a fantastic job. That episode alone, it's like if you guys watch The Last of Us or whatever that show's called about the being on the run with Pedro Pascal and all that kind of stuff. That 3rd episode of the 2nd season with the 2 guys that are in love in the house, that 3rd episode could be a standalone. This episode, the 5th episode, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story, that could be a standalone. His telling about what happened to him and the specific memories he had, I think is such a portrayal of SA in our society today that's never talked about, especially with men. I think it's such an important episode, and I think it was so fantastically done. When you watch the show, okay, it's interesting because he does go in, they show the court trials, they show both of them, and then they, show what happens in the aftermath and all this kind of stuff. But there's so many different variations. They show so many different things that happened, right before they went into the house and killed their parents. We know they killed their parents. They said they killed their parents, right? They killed their parents allegedly because they were being abused for years on end by their father, and their mother stood by and that she did nothing. That's supposedly what happened. And that at that time, okay, that SA with men as victims was not taken as seriously. It's why the attorney in the show, she says in the show, if we weren't talking about Lyle and Erik Menendez, if we were talking about Lucy and Erica Menendez, would you look at it differently? Because you shouldn't. She says that line, almost exactly how I said it, is in the show. And I really believe that the purpose of the show, I think it's interesting because that he comes out and says, I don't believe that Ryan Murphy is this naive. I don't believe that Ryan Murphy is that naive either. I think there's a very important reason why Ryan Murphy picked this story specifically to tell. Out of all the serial killer stories that he could tell, or out of all the true crime that he could tell, it's interesting to me that he picked this story on the heels, and now he's supposedly going to do Ed Gein next, which I don't know if that's true or not. But what's interesting to me about that is that I think we live in a world and time where there's so much discussion right now about the believability of victims, male and female victims, no matter what their ages are, the believability of victims, right? And because there's a lot of question, not in there just about being men, but of their age. There's a lot of discussion of, was Erik Menendez really being abused by his father at an age where he could have fought him off? Basically implying that you should be able to always fight off your victim, that it's not an emotional abuse that's going on as well. I really, to be honest with you, and watching the whole show, it was so crazy to me when I read this because I had a completely different take on it. I was like, I feel like Ryan Murphy is giving commentary to how this case has always been a case about the societal judgment that men have faced as being victims of sexual abuse. Not that I by any means think that their parents should have been killed by that at all, you know? I mean, we live in a world right now where we're talking about like Gypsy Rose Blanchard and having this huge fandom, right? Because it's something I cover on my drama commentary channel a lot is Gypsy Rose Blanchard. That Gypsy Rose Blanchard is being, you know, given this huge fandom and people are like fawning all over her because she was a victim of her mother's Munchausen by proxy. Well, you know, 30 years ago, that probably isn't something that would have really been discussed. They would have just said, you know, that Gypsy Rose Blanchard was this horrible woman. We're in a different world today where victims of abuse are looked at in a different way. No, I don't believe that Ryan Murphy is naive at all. I think he very deliberately picked this story to tell at this time. You know, I also think it's interesting. We just saw the Lacey and Scott Peterson documentaries come out. Scott Peterson's Face to Face and Lacey Peterson's on Netflix. We just saw those documentaries come out right at the same time that the Los Angeles Innocence Project is reopening the case of Scott Peterson. I don't think that timing is coincidence. I just don't. And when I was looking into this stuff about the Menendez case, it's interesting because they are trying to, the Menendez brother, I think it's Erik Menendez's attorney, is entering into evidence the letter from his cousin that was nobody took seriously at that time to timestamp how many years before he had informed people of the abuse and that none of the family members were willing to do anything about it. There's several pieces of evidence that are being like entered into, like they're trying to like reopen this case in defense of the Menendez brothers so that possibly this case could be heard again. It's interesting. I don't know that I think it's by accident that Ryan Murphy picked this story because he knew that, I mean, this would have had to have been filmed and planned so many years in advance, but I think it's really commentary on the believability of victims today in our society, you know? Not just the Menendez brothers, not just men, but women, adult women, people in marriages, people in families, the elderly. I mean, the elderly are some of our most abused people in our society today that get overlooked all the time, right? And I really think it's the commentary on it. I thought, when you watch the end of it, I mean, the very end of it is this conversation on the boat. This is the kind of stuff I don't like about dramatizations. It's about the conversation on the boat, right? Well, through the entire show, you think the conversation has been that the boys are on the end of the boat. They're on this shark fishing trip. And you think that the boys are on this boat and they're like worried to death that their parents are plotting to kill them at any moment, right? And then what they show at the end of it, which nobody knows what the real conversation was except for the captain, but the captain couldn't have possibly heard him, even though like he was on the witness stand. The conversation is between Kitty and Jose, and they're talking about how much they love each other and that he's been cheating on her with his wife and he's going to be a better husband and he's going to get the boys set straight and all this kind of stuff. And then it flashes to them at the end of the boat, and I think it's like Lyle says to Erik, are we really serious? Or Erik says, are we really serious about this? And they're like, yeah, we're going to do it. And so it's like the conversation we thought we knew was not the conversation at all. I think that scene is ending the show to say, we have no clue what really happened behind closed doors. We have no clues what conversations were real. We have no clues about any of this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, we don't know the real answers because, and I've said this about Gypsy Rose Blanchard as well. We don't know what Dee Blanchard said. We don't know what her side of the story was. We never will know that because Gypsy Rose Blanchard killed her. So we don't know what Kitty and Jose's side of the story was or what they did or, you know, whatever. We don't know any of that because Lyle and Erik Menendez killed them. And yes, they were horribly abused, okay? But we don't know the outcome of what would have happened afterwards had they not. And I said this in my video the other day. I mean, and this is the reality of it, that millions of people are abused every single day, and that doesn't make it right. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrific, right? And I think this is the other part of the conversation. You know, I don't think it's by accident that on the heels of Gypsy Rose Blanchard getting out of prison, that Ryan Murphy turns around when we're doing commentary about victims of abuse, okay, and what rights do they have and how far do we take it, that he does a docudrama about the Menendez brothers, victims of abuse, that took the lives of their parents. I don't think that that's by accident. And we knew 6 months to a year before she got out that Gypsy Rose Blanchard was getting out. That's when all that stuff was tying up. I think that the two are very closely tied together. I think they're very representative of kind of the same stories from two different angles. You know, one was SA and the other one was Munchausen by proxy. So this public outcry is interesting to me. I watched the whole show. There is one incident where, I mean, they question a lot Erik Menendez's sexuality in the show. But I do remember that being questioned a lot. I do remember that part of it. But there was only one scene, and it was when they were having a party at the Bel Air Hotel. I think it was the Beverly Hills Hotel, or I think it was the Bel Air Hotel. And they're having a party, and they're like doing cocaine or smoking a cigarette or something. And Erik Menendez is dancing, and Lyle comes up to him and gets very close, and he whispers something or takes something to his cheek. That's the closest that he ever gets to even them having them showing any kind of physical interaction. They show one scene where the maid says she walks in and they're in the shower. Well, that was fact of the court case. That came out in the court case. They also show cousins defending them in the court case. So Ryan Murphy's showing all of the facts that were presented in the court case. That was just one thing that they showed. There was not any scenes where they're like kissing and making out and having this incestuous romantic affair. The only thing that they indicate in there, which we hear a lot about this in victim stories like this, is that allegedly Jose Menendez was essaying his son Lyle. And then when Lyle said no more, he started doing it to Erik. And that Lyle also essayed Erik because to some degree it was a taught behavior. And he was a kid. Which is why in one of the scenes, when Erik brings it up, he says, I don't want to talk about that. That was stuff we did when we were kids. Because he has shame and he has guilt associated with also being a victim, And I think that that's the other conversation, is that victims can be abusers as well. And we don't want to talk about that today. I don't know what people think about this show. I have to be honest with you. I don't think the show romanticized any kind of sexual relationship between Lyle and Erik Menendez. If it did, I must have missed an episode, because I didn't see that episode at all. And I watched the whole show. I think it opened a lot of important conversations that we need to be having. I think it opened a conversation whether people are upset with the show and how it was done. I didn't even think it was that great of a show. Whether people want to be upset with how it was done or whether people want to have a serious conversation, I think it opens a lot of conversations. I think it opens a conversation about believability of victims, and in 2024 that's a huge conversation that we're having. I think it opens the conversation of men as victims in our society and the stigma as men as victims of SA and how they're afraid to come out and share their stories. I think it opens up to what do we do with those victims years down the road? What do we do with court cases down the road? When a jury in 1994 would have completely ruled differently on a case than we would in 2024, or would we? And do those people continue to stay in prison today? I think it opens a discussion about abuse within homes and how that affects siblings and how it affects that. I think it opens a lot of conversations, a lot of important conversations to be had. I don't know, I guess maybe we can have public outcry about it or we can have conversations. I choose to have conversations with the people in my life today and ask, what do we think about this, So anyway, that's what I thought about it. As a TV show, I don't know that I was really moved that one way or the other and thinking oh my God, this is the greatest TV show in the entire life, in the entire world. And you know what? And this reaction that I'm doing today might completely fall short of what people think. People might be like, oh, Peter, I have a completely different take. And feel free to share your opinions in the comment section below. That's what I want. I want to have a conversation about this show. I want to have a conversation. I want people to share what they thought in the comment sections below. And I went into this show really thinking it was going to be a sexualized version of the show. I thought it's going to be totally homoerotica out 9 yards, the whole 9 yards, And it really, to be honest with you, it really wasn't. Once you got past the second episode, it was really focused on the abuse the boys suffered at the hands of their father. And I think it's interesting that he's talking about the lies in here. Well, they show a whole scene where Jose Menendez hires an escort in New York City and the whole Greek thing. Well, I don't know where that story comes from or where that came from. If that's in the trial, I don't know. Or if that person testified, they never showed it in the show. But they do show that scene. And they show him being exactly how he would have been with his sons and talking about the Roman days and all that kind of stuff. So that piece alone gives validity to Lyle and Erik's stories. Ryan Murphy could have left that piece out. That piece was put in there to give validity to their stories and to show that what they were saying was true and that they were victims that were treated a certain way that they probably wouldn't be treated today. Yes, they still killed their parents, but the whole thing that they talk about in the court case is this defense that they could have had as victims of abuse that they weren't allowed to have back then because nobody believed them, And nobody believed them because Lyle Menendez allegedly came out and talked to this woman in the tape, and I looked it up, and that book exists. So that was true. That book does exist, where he was having conversations and gloating to this woman on the phone, and who knows why he did that. Maybe none of that was true. Maybe he was bragging about that. I don't know. There's so many pieces to this story. It's not just about that, but the public outcry to me is interesting. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.